I'm Kevin Shuker, and this is HealthVox. Tonight we're coming to you from Bonobo's Restaurant on 23rd Street and Madison Avenue. And we're here with Donna Peronne from Accident on Wellness. And she's organized a great evening with a very exciting lecturer with the name of Rhio. So Donna, tell us a little bit about Rhio. Who is she and what's she going to tell us tonight?
Rhio has been living in New York for a very long time, and she has written a book called Hooked on Raw. She has created a lot of community events over the years in New York City, and she's going to speak tonight about health and wellness, and she's terrific.
She is. I've heard her speak before. She's really terrific. And I know you're associated, and we're working this lecture series with your group, which is Accident on Wellness. And this meets regularly here in New York City. So tell us a little bit about Accident on Wellness.
Well, Accident on Wellness, we offer support group meetings every Wednesday night at Caravan of Dreams Restaurant. It's located at 405 East 6th Street. And we meet about 7:30. It's all by donation. It's an opportunity for people to gather together, sort of like in a sharing circle. So you can voice your questions and make comments and meet other people who are interested in living a healthier life.
That's really great. And how could somebody contact you? So they wanted to find out some information about Accident on Wellness.
You could call our hotline number at 212-760-5953.
I know Donna sends out a great email giving you all the details of things that are going on in New York City. So we hope you check out on Accident on Wellness, and we'll see you again here on HealthVox.
So the title of my talk today is Vibrant Glowing Health is Every Person's Birthright. If you follow the Western medical system, you're not going to get there. And one of the reasons that you won't get there is because the whole system is based on a false premise, or several false premises, but I don't have time this evening to go into them all. But I just want to make you aware of one very important false premise that the whole system is based on. Now, have you heard that disease is caused by germs? You've heard that, right? How many in this room believe that? Oh my gosh, I'm preaching to the choir right now. Oh, you believe it, okay. Okay, I'm going to tell you. He believes it, okay. Long about in the 1850s, there was a big controversy going on about biology and disease and how disease is created. And I'm sure you've all heard of Louis Pasteur. He's very well known. But at the same time, there was another microbiologist at that very same time that was that had a different system, a different idea, and his name was Antoine Béchamp. Have you all heard about Antoine Béchamp? Some of you haven't. Okay. This happened in France, and there was this whole big controversy raging about what caused disease. Now, Antoine Béchamp, he was looking through a microscope, and he discovered that in the blood there's a little tiny living body. It's like a microorganism that's in the blood. And he discovered by looking in the blood, live blood, that that little organism could change form and shape. And it would start off as a benign little particle of life. He called this the microzyma. And due to certain conditions, that little microzyma could evolve and change shape. And as it did, it became pathogenic. So it started out as a benign life form and then went pathogenic. Along about the same time that he was developing his theory of disease, Louis Pasteur was saying that germs cause disease, and his system was called monomorphism. And what Louis Pasteur and what we believe today, at least in the Western system, is that a germ invades the body from the outside. And that's what makes us sick. The germ comes in from the outside. And the other thing that monomorphism means is that the germ is the germ is the germ. It never changes shape. It never changes form. It just is what it is. So that system is called monomorphism. That's what the medical system is basing their practice today of getting rid of that germ. So what the medical system does today is it takes that premise and it tries to kill the germ. And everything the Western medical system does is to kill the germ. Because, for example, it gives chemotherapy, that's to kill the germ. Radiation, to kill the germ. Surgery is to cut out the germ and the diseased tissue. And drugs are to kill the germ. So everything that they're doing today is based on killing that germ. But if you go back to Antoine Béchamp's system, and his system was called pleomorphism. That's the difference. Monomorphism, the germ never changes. Pleomorphism, the germ will change and evolve. The germ does not, or the microbe does not come from the outside in. It is in our blood to begin with. It is in our body to begin with. And then it will change form to become a pathogenic form. But what makes it become a pathogenic form? Do you all know what makes it change form, or what makes it start down the path to change form? Acidity. Okay. This group is on it, right? So the crux of the whole situation is if your body is alkaline or slightly alkaline, the blood is slightly alkaline, the tissues are slightly alkaline, that little life microbe that's in your blood is not going to change form. And you're going to have immunity. This is true immunity. But if through your lifestyle, and I'll give you some examples, like the standard American diet would be one, or let's say soft drinks, that's a big one, because that acidifies the body a lot. I think a soft drink is like a 2 on the scale of acidity. So it would take like, I don't know how many glasses of water to neutralize one soda. I think I heard somewhere 37 glasses of water to neutralize one soda, the acidity that you're taking into your body. And our children and a lot of adults are drinking all that acidity. So it's no wonder that we're becoming more and more ill. But the other things that can make the pH go acid are chemicals, pesticides, pollution. And in the city, we live with pollution. We have pollution from cars. We have pollution in other ways. So all of these things can make the whole terrain of the body become acid. But one very important factor that can make the body go acid too, aside from food, is emotions. So for example, let's say you're eating all the right things, and you've got lots of plants in your house cleaning the air, and you've got some air filters, and you're doing all the right things, but somebody is making you angry, or somebody's making you upset. Well, what happens to your body? It becomes acid almost immediately. So you really have to watch your emotions and try to keep an even keel with your emotions. Not to say you're going to become a robot and not feel anything, but for the most part, you have to be on an even keel. Try not to get into big discussions or big fights with people or things like that, because that will also make your body acid. Brian Clement, who is the director of the Hippocrates Health Institute in West Palm Beach, Florida, he deals with a lot of ill people. And what he has said is that a certain percentage of the people that come to his institute do not get well. I think he said something about 10 or 20%. They just do not get well. And he was trying to find out why that was happening, because most of the people are getting well and going on and reversing all their situations, but some of these people are not getting well. And he discovered one thing, and I think it's very important too, that a person also has to believe in their recovery. You can't just do all the right things, but sort of believe, but not believe, but maybe I believe, but I'll believe tomorrow, but show me. That's one of the things that Brian Clement discovered, is that if a person doesn't have the belief in their own recovery, they either don't recover fully, they don't recover at all, or it impedes their progress. So there's also a mindset that has to be changed insofar as how you think about your health. Getting back to Antoine Béchamp. Antoine Béchamp was not the only microbiologist or scientist that discovered this little tiny life form in the blood. He had, along about his time, there was someone called Gunther Anderlin, and he was from Germany. And Gunther Anderlin was his student, and he went on to develop the theory even more, and he called it a protist. And then there's been other scientists throughout the decades and in the last couple centuries that have also discovered this. But the problem was that since they didn't all get through together and agree on how it was creating disease, they sort of worked independently from each other. Like, for example, there's a scientist now up in Canada, and he calls that little life particle the somatid, and his name is Gaston Naessens. But he discovered the exact same thing as Antoine Béchamp discovered. Then there was Virginia Livingston Wheeler. She also discovered it, gave it a different name. So here we have a whole theory, but when you think of it, it's very difficult because someone's talking about the protid, somebody's talking about the somatid, somebody's talking about this, about that. It's very difficult to know what they're talking about. So to just put it all together, it's a very, very minute, it's a very small life form that's in the blood. When the pH goes the wrong way, that life form starts degenerating into pathogenic forms. That's the whole theory, and that's the whole, actually, I believe it's a reality of how disease is created, from the inside, not from the outside. I'm talking about microorganisms. But the microorganisms, we have microorganisms in our blood, okay? Now, when we have a normal pH, the microorganism is beneficial to us. It's benign. It doesn't hurt us. It doesn't harm us. When our pH goes acid, that form changes, and it starts changing. Gaston Naessens, who I mentioned up in Canada, he found that little, he calls it, I think, the somatid, it changes, he found it changed 16 times, and it changes from a microorganism to a bacteria, could change to a fungus, and then to a yeast, and then to a mold. So it goes through all these forms before you become, and then once it goes through those 16 forms, you're gone. You're gone. Now, why is this happening? I mean, this is something that happens in nature when things die. When things die, the microorganisms change form and break those things down. But we don't want to be broken down while we're still living and breathing, right? So we have to keep ourselves clean. We don't want this mold and yeast to come in our body and start breaking us down while we're still alive. And this is another book that talks about it. It's called Sick and Tired by Robert Young. And I'll pass this one around, which also talks about the same theory. I didn't make this up. There's scientists all over the world, independent scientists all over the world that have discovered that this is the way disease is created. Comes from the inside, not from the outside. And so if you want to correct disease, you have to take steps to correct the terrain of your body. Once the terrain changes back, the disease just sort of fades away. Right? Or a cold even, or the flu. Okay. With a cold or the flu or any other kind of infectious disease, if you have if your blood alkalinity is where it's supposed to be, you are immune from that. You cannot get that. You will not get that.
But then you get something from the outside, from someone.
But it's not enough. It's not like, you know, it's not like what this lady said where somebody is trying to poison you with biological, you know, germs or something. It's not something like that. It's just a normal little germ around. The body can naturally, very easily handle that. You will have immunity. Yeah. The question is, in the book by Robert Young, he's against eating fruit. He says it feeds yeast and fungus. Well, how I feel about that is that it will feed yeast and fungus if your body is in trouble. But not everybody is in trouble. So in situations that he has seen where people have the problem with yeast and fungus, then he takes them off fruit. Whether he puts them on again, I don't know. But I feel that you can maybe do it for a short time or a year, whatever it takes, to get that infection, the fungal and the yeast, under control, back to normal, and then you add in a little fruit and check yourself. See what happens. I do not believe in the fruit diet. There's somebody, there's a speaker, and I really admire him in many ways, but what he teaches is a lot of fruit, all fruit, Fruitarianism. And I do not agree with that because there's several reasons. First of all, this person lives in a very warm climate. So maybe the sun and his active lifestyle is burning off some of that sugar. But I think for people that live up here in the north to ingest that amount of sugar, 100% fruitarian diet, is just too much. And I noticed that, for example, in winters coming up, I want less fruit in the winter and I want more grounding foods. For me, those are roots. And if you look at nature, in nature, when winter comes, the leaves drop, right? And all the energy goes into the root. And so there's one recipe in my book called Hooked on Roots, and I really recommend that in the winter because it's very, very grounding for people that live in the north in the winter. I do not agree with 100% fruitarianism. Perhaps in some kind of utopian lifestyle where we're all living near the ocean and, you know, something like that, maybe it would work. But I really feel that the body needs more than just fruit. It needs vegetables, it needs leafy greens, it needs wild vegetables, it needs sea vegetables, it needs a wide variety of food. The American Indians, actually, you know, we go into our supermarkets here and it looks like we have an abundance of food there. And compared to other countries, for example, I have relatives who live in Cuba, and compared to people that live in Cuba, that is an abundance of food. Because when you live in Cuba, you're standing in line to get food, and you don't know what you can buy that day, and you have to buy whatever's available. So when you go into the supermarket here, you think we have an abundance. But the American Indians were eating so many other varieties of food than what we do. They had hundreds of items that they were eating that we don't even know about. A lot of those foods are wild foods, and I really recommend wild foods. And the reason that I recommend wild foods is because they are nature's foods in the sense that they're not cultivated. Just think about this. If you plant a lettuce seed out there in the crack of the sidewalk, it will not grow. But have you seen weeds growing out of the sidewalk? Right? And they'll grow tall and they're strong. Well, plants will impart their energy to us. So I want to eat those weeds so I can be strong. Cultivated lettuce or cultivated vegetables, they need our assistance to survive. Weeds don't need our assistance. They're going to survive anyway. And these are the kind of foods that I suggest that we have a percentage of them in our diet. And in our farm that Lee and I are that are building now, that's one of the things that we're going to be offering. We're going to be offering these weeds because it's very hard in the city to find them. Okay, in New York, we have a really good resource. There's somebody called Wildman Steve Brill. Have you heard of him? Wildman Steve Brill, he takes people for walks every weekend in different parks, and he will help you identify edible weeds. One thing I do know is that certain lifestyle that we're leading is depleting us of B12. And one of the things it's doing is the catalytic converters in cars. The emissions from the catalytic converters is depleting the human body of B12. So it could be that it's not the diet that's doing it. Then there's, Gingy had mentioned in one of her responses that there was a study done at Tufts University where they found out that 40% of the American people are deficient in B12. 40%. Now, there's only 10% vegetarians in this country. So if 40% are deficient, that means that it's not just a vegan or vegetarian problem. That means it's a problem across the board with everybody. Because one of the things that they give as an example of why you shouldn't be on a vegetarian or vegan diet is that you're going to be low in B12. But again, I'm not claiming to know the answer to this. I have to do more study. But there are things, there's you know how there was a controversy between complete protein and incomplete protein, and how certain industries really ran with that, like the dairy industry and like the meat industry. They really jumped on that because meat supposedly was a complete protein and vegetables is an incomplete protein, so it's inferior. So that is sort of like a myth that we have grown up with and come to believe. I'm not saying that the B12 thing is similar. I'm saying that it just sort of reminds me of that whole controversy. All these years later, we find out that fruits and vegetables are loaded with amino acids, and so all the protein that you need is in fruit and vegetables. And if you feel that you need extra protein for some reason, you can definitely get it from nuts and seeds. So there's plenty of protein in the raw, vegan, vegetarian diet. From my perspective, you can get a lot of B12 from different foods like fermented foods. Some raw food people don't believe in fermented foods, but there is B12 in fermented foods. The best alkalizer in the world that I know of is wheatgrass juice. Wheatgrass juice will alkalize your body faster and better than anything, and that's why they use it in all the raw food institutes. And they have it there available. You can make it 5 times a day if you want to. And I have actually seen, though, you have to go slow if you're just starting because it moves so fast. It's such a tremendous alkalizer. I think you just have to, if you want to be healthy, I think you just have to make the decision that you're going to have to take the time to honor yourself and honor your health. I mean, it's really important. I believe it's one of the fundamental things, because when you're healthy, you can enjoy everything else in life. But when you're ailing, you know, you have you have a problem enjoying everything else that life has to offer. What's the difference between hybridized and? Oh, that's a whole lecture on its own. But briefly, okay, hybridization was done through, we've had like maybe 10,000 years of agriculture where the plant breeders would take certain characteristics. Sometimes they would sacrifice certain characteristics in a plant to get other characteristics, and they would cross the pollen of the plants that had the characteristics that they wanted, and the next year they'd get that new plant, and then they'd keep crossing and crossing until they got the plant that they wanted. So hybridization is still done with the intermediary of nature. You have to do it out in the field with nature, with pollen. When you do genetic engineering, it's completely altered at the cellular level in a laboratory. It's not done with nature and with her restraints. Like, for example, and I'm just going to be real brief because that in nature, you could never get a fish gene into a tomato because you never saw fish, swimming into the field and saying, hey, baby, I'm going to mate with you. It just doesn't happen. There's restraints. It cannot happen in nature. But the geneticists today, they don't see any problem with this. So I want to thank you all for coming. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I just wanted to thank Rhio for tonight's terrific lecture. Wasn't she great? She's just such a terrific lady. And I also want to thank Bonobos Restaurant for featuring our event tonight. Come check us out at any Accidental Wellness Support Group meeting and watch our show every week. We'll see you soon.
Shut down in process.